Crude oil prices are surging. We're currently retesting levels above $110 per barrel. And so we're currently retesting this resistance as we're also seeing that cumulative volume delta has been decreasing significantly. And so we haven't even seen buyer's aggression topping out. In addition, we have also seen that the VRVP, the visible range volume profile, is indicating that we're currently entering areas with less volume being traded. And so this certainly would speak for a small correction being overdue. At the same time, we do obviously have bullish fundamentals and also macroeconomics. And so let's really have a look at the big picture to understand what might be happening next year to crude oil prices. Let's first have a look at the weekly chart of crude oil prices and also some really interesting indicators that show you that history is in fact always repeating itself. We tend to see cycles, we tend to see business cycles and liquidity cycles, and we do obviously also have them being reflected by the crude oil prices. Now, what you can see here on the chart is once here on the top, the crude oil price, and also here the gold to oil ratio. And historically, we've actually seen that whenever we've seen a divergence happening between crude oil prices moving to the upside and the gold to oil ratio moving to the downside, whenever that divergence has actually been happening, that ultimately has been marking the top for crude oil prices and then actually marked the beginning of those sell-offs that ultimately led to those lows forming out that we've indicated with those orange bubbles here. And you can actually see that happened here in with the dot-com bubble in 2000. That also happened with the great financial crisis in 2008. It also happened here in 2014, in 2018, and also in 2021. Now, whenever we've seen those divergences, that really has been a nearly 100% hit rate for calling the tops at crude oil. And in addition to that, we also like to take a look at the stochastic RSI. Now, this is beautifully showing you those cycles even more because you really do see those cycles being reflected by the stochastic RSI. Those phases where we've seen those divergences have mostly been marked by really high RSI readings, mostly above 80, above 90. And in fact, we are currently seeing those levels being currently reached once again. And the last time we've seen those levels being reached here at the stochastic RSI has actually been when we've seen those tops forming out. And so that is really a beautiful indication of those cycles, and it is beautifully showing you that we are currently in the last phase of this business cycle. And what you can really now take as a tool to really understand those cycles even more is taking a look at the trend line that we've put on the chart here at the gold to oil ratio, because you can actually see that the last few times we've seen those tops form out, that most of the time actually coincided with this ratio falling to levels at this trend line. And so that has actually been happening here in 08. It has actually been happening roughly here in 2014. It has been happening in 2018. It has been happening in 2022. And now, obviously, that does make sense. We tend to see those two commodities, gold and oil, obviously always rebalance, right? And whenever we see those periods where oil is actually starting to outperform gold prices, that obviously shows you or is reflected by this ratio falling, as we're seeing oil being the denominator of this ratio. And so when oil prices are surging, also relative against gold, that ratio is falling. And historically, it actually gold actually topped out when this ratio has been falling to this trend line. We've actually seen those retests of this trend line beautifully marking the last few tops here at crude oil, and that would obviously mean we do see this ratio fall back to 23. Now that means that oil prices are basically 23 times less valuable than gold prices, and so this ratio really seems to be beautifully indicating that we do see rebalances. Thanks for watching. See you the next time. Bye bye.